Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of this top 10? Top 10 Booker T matches. Now we all know, love Booker T. He's easily one of the most beloved wrestlers of the 90s and 2000s. And I was thinking because his name popped up in the wrestling news, why not do a top 10 Booker T matches? With all that being said, let's jump into the list. Starting with number 10, Harlem Heat versus the Outsiders from Halloween Havoc 1996. As a mild spoiler, this is the only Harlem Heat match on this list. And that's not to say that they didn't have great matches. They had matches that were great with the Nasty Boys, the Steiners, the Outsiders as we see here, and all of the other tag teams of the era. As a matter of fact, I think they are the best tag team of the WCW era, between them and the Steiner brothers, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for me, this was one of those matches where kind of early on in the NWO run, we're getting to see them going up against what are some dream matches, Hall and Nash versus Booker T and Stevie Ray, a match that even 6 months to a year earlier you wouldn't have thought could happen. This was just a really fun, really good tag team match, hence why it made the list. Next up at number 9, from No Mercy 2008, a fatal 4-way match, Booker T versus Batista, Bobby Lashley, and Finlay. This era of SmackDown and the stars they had at the time, to me, was the better of the WWE shows. I thoroughly enjoyed what they did with these guys here, whether it be Booker or Lashley, Finlay, or Batista even. This is kind of an example of for the bigger stars they had. This is a really fun match. Normally, I don't put these fatal 4-ways or multi-man matches on my lists for best matches, but this was just really good with some really great talent there. It was awesome. I enjoy this whole era of SmackDown. I thought it was really fun. Like I said, just a great example of what they were doing at the time. I'll go on from that on number 8. Booker T versus Scott Steiner from WCW Monday Nitro, March 26, 2001. And if you're not familiar with that, that's the last Nitro. And I talked about it a bit when I talked about the Steiners and Harlem Heat. It kind of feels like, to an extent, Scott Steiner and Booker T's career paralleled each other in a lot of ways. They were great tag team stars. They had some singles success. They built their way up to be world champion contenders, and by this era of WCW, they were two of the bigger stars in the company. This was champion versus champion, Booker T's US champion versus Scott Steiner's world champion, and it's just one of those highlights of that really surreal last WCW show, where you see a lot of the greatness of WCW, even though it had gone through so much trouble and so much negativity over the last 2 years at that point. There still was a spark there. There was still hope. There was still Booker T. There was still Scott Steiner. There were other wrestlers that were putting in some of the best work of their career. Easily two of the best stars of the WCW era. I absolutely love this match. I'll go from that on number 7. From just a few months after that, Booker T versus The Rock from SummerSlam 2001. There were a lot of ways that it kind of felt like Booker T was WCW's answer to The Rock. Matter of fact, he did the bookend, which was the Rock Bottom. And this kind of felt like seeing the star of WCW go up against the star of WWE. And this was one of those dream matches we wanted to see. This was right up there with Goldberg versus Austin, Sting versus The Undertaker. Everybody wanted to see The Rock and Booker T wrestle. And when they finally did get a chance to do so, they didn't disappoint. People don't often talk about The Rock in his best matches. It's more about him as an entertainer, which is deserved because he's one of the best entertainers that's ever been in the wrestling business. But when tasked to put on a great match, whether it be against Triple H, whether it be against Austin, Booker T here, over and over again, The Rock proved that he could go and he could have great matches. This to me is one of the better of both men's career, hence why it's on my list. I love this match as well, and I keep saying that, I know. It's hard not to, because I'm very excited thinking about these matches. Now going from that on number 6. You're going to start to notice a pattern, if you haven't already. A lot of the great wrestlers of this generation are on this list. and this one is no exception. One of the greatest, probably top 4 or 5 in my opinion, in-ring talents of that time frame. Booker T versus Eddie Guerrero from Uncensored 1998. 98 to me was the last truly great year of WCW, and don't get me wrong, I loved watching WCW all the way to the end, but 98 still felt like there was hope. They were still in the fight. It wasn't a total knockout at that point. They still had stuff going for them. And some of the things they had going for them was the bubbling undercard. Guys like Eddie Guerrero, Booker T, the Radicals, which Eddie was part of, guys like Scott Steiner and Buff Bagwell in the NWO. There was this bubbling up of newer talent that was raising its way to the top of the card. And I feel like part of the reason why WCW didn't last, well, one of the main things is because it wasn't making money by the end, but one of the reasons it wasn't is because they kept relying on the same people. And yes, they did include some of the younger guys by the end, but they allowed too many of these great talents to walk away. Think of the greatness of Eddie Guerrero. Think of Chris Jericho. Think of, even though he's a pariah now, and when his name is brought up in wrestling situations, it gives a bad taste, but just how good was Chris Benoit when they let him walk? Then you got other guys like Saturn, Malenko, Raven going back to WCW. I thought that was a big hit because Raven was a guy that could have been elevated to world champion status in WCW. Losing a lot of these guys, losing talents like this, and I know we're talking about a match here, but it just, to me, is part of the reason why they ended up losing the Monday Night War. Eddie Guerrero and Booker T here showed what most fans already knew about them. They were fantastic wrestlers. They were two of the biggest stars in the world and were about to be even bigger. I absolutely love this match. There I go saying it again. It's just a great match in my opinion. I'll go from that on number 5. You're going to notice there's a couple times where I say this on this list, but this was a match that was overshadowed by other matches on the same card, and that's Booker T versus Edge from WrestleMania 18. And obviously this gets overshadowed by The Rock versus Hulk Hogan on the same card, but for my money, this is the better in-ring match. Edge was a lot like Booker T for WWE. Edge had been elevating his standing, working his ass off, trying to become a main eventer, much like Booker T just a few years before. And these are just, again, two fantastic wrestlers, two top-notch wrestlers. This is one of the better WrestleManias of all time, one of the most fun WrestleManias to watch as a fan. It gave us some of those dream matches like Hogan versus The Rock, but it also gave us this match here, which might not have necessarily been a dream match on everybody's mind, but it delivered, and it delivered in a big way. It's a big reason why the two guys would be two of the biggest stars of the next decade. They just really went out there and put on a great match. Now going from that, our number 4, from one Canadian to another, Booker T versus Bret the Hitman Hart from Bash at the Beach 1998. A lot has been said about the disappointment of Bret the Hitman Hart's run in WCW, and there is a lot to say about that. I've said stuff about it myself. I think it's one of their biggest lost opportunities. However, when you go back and you watch some of it, you find nuggets of greatness like this. Here we have Bret Hart, one of the big stars of that decade, kind of towards the end of his run, especially with the injury we know is coming up, and he's helping to elevate the status of a younger star in Booker T, much like he did with Steve Austin, much like he always was willing to do. This was just another one of those times where Booker T was put in a situation where he had a chance to show off how great he was with another all-time great, and he absolutely proved that he belonged there. I think this went a long way to the eventual rise of Booker T being the world champion, is matches like this, proving that he could be in there with Bret Hart, proving that the fans would care about him against Bret Hart, and this was just a great match. I really enjoyed it. I thought this was really fun, hence why it's on my list. I'll go from that, our number 3, two WCW stalwarts. However, this happened in a WWE ring. That's Booker T versus Rey Mysterio from the Great American Bash 2006. And even the title of the pay-per-view, it's a WCW name. I talked about the Fatal 4-Way and that era of SmackDown, and this was right around that time frame. And it felt like SmackDown was the more in-ring wrestling-based talent. If you wanted to see a Kurt Angle, if you wanted to see Bobby Lashley, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, you would tune into SmackDown. If you wanted to see more storyline, Triple H stuff, you tune into Raw. And not saying that that's a bad thing. This is just two absolute legends in pro wrestling going at it. I mean, there's a million things you could say about Rey Mysterio and how innovative he is and how important he is to pro wrestling. And you could say the same things with Booker T. This is just a really, really fun match. I rather enjoyed it. That's why it's on my list. And there I go saying the same thing again. I'll go from that, our number 2. Booker T versus Kurt Angle from Judgment Day 2005. And no, I'm not talking about the faction with Rhea and Dominic and Finn and JD and Damian. I'm talking about the pay-per-view Judgment Day. I keep going back to that era of SmackDown because it was so good. And having guys like Kurt Angle there, having guys like Rey Mysterio there, having guys like Edge there. JBL even was doing his best work at this time frame. It's such an underrated era of wrestling television. But when you really go back and you watch, it's matches like this that make that era so special. Kurt Angle versus Booker T. What a great match. Even if you think about it just in your head, these guys are going to put on a great match no matter what. I mean, it's Kurt Angle and Booker T. This is probably one of my favorite Kurt Angle matches along with one of my favorite Booker T matches. Both these guys had just a great chemistry with each other. And it's kind of sad that they didn't have that like super long rivalry because I think they definitely could have. Something along the lines of The Rock and Steve Austin, where it went over several years. But what we did get of Booker and Angle, this was just great. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, two of the premier wrestlers of the time, putting on one of the better matches of that era. Now, before we do get to our number 1, I do a thing here called the best of the rest. Basically, it's things that were thought of for the list but didn't quite make it. First up, we have a 5-way match. Booker T versus John Cena versus Mick Foley versus Bobby Lashley versus Randy Orton from Vengeance 2007. And again, here's what I was saying about that SmackDown roster. Cena, Foley, Orton. Foley had came back out of retirement for this, but you see what I'm getting at here. Just look at the names of the talent here. John Cena, Mick Foley, Bobby Lashley, Randy Orton, Booker T. These are 5 guys that are all Hall of Famers, all cemented themselves as major names in the wrestling business. This just was an extremely fun match, a very chaotic match as most multi-man matches are. Very good psychology in this. I think the psychology in this is better than most multi-man matches. I just really enjoyed this match. Unfortunately, it didn't quite make the list, but it was considered. Now, last but not least on the best of the rest, a match that definitely gets overshadowed by the rest of the card on that show, much like I said with the Edge match at WrestleMania, Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett from Bash at the Beach 2000. And everybody's going to look at Bash at the Beach 2000 and the Hulk Hogan Jeff Jarrett thing where Jeff Jarrett lays down for him and Hogan says some work shoot stuff and then Russo says some work shoot stuff and there's a whole litany of things that came out of it. There's even a Dark Side of the Ring episode about that. But what gets lost in all of that is later on that same show, Booker T and Jeff Jarrett put on a fantastic match. And it's kind of a shame that it gets overlooked. And it's kind of a shame that what this card is known for is the crap with Hogan and Russo instead of being known for this, being known for Jarrett and Booker, who were 2 guys that were just hungry to be the main event stars. And unfortunately, because of some crappy booking, they're overlooked by history. Another match I really enjoy, unfortunately it just didn't quite make the list, but it was considered. Now before I get to my number 1, if you think I left a match off the list, put it 1 too high, 1 too low, let me know down here in the comments. While you're there, smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't, and if you see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. Becoming a channel member definitely helps. I have a goal at the time this is being released of making it to 1,500 subscribers by WrestleMania. I'm sitting at 1,460, give or take a few right now as I look before coming out here. So it is an obtainable goal. We have a couple weeks left. If you're not subscribed, please consider hitting that button so I can meet that goal. With that being said, my number 1 Booker T match of all time, and I really hate to say this because I hate bringing up the other person, Booker T versus Chris Benoit at the Great American Bash 1998. This was the end of their best of 7 series, and the match that kind of really put both of them on the map, or the rivalry that put both of them on the map if you want to go through the whole series of 7, which were all really good matches. And I know I hate talking about the guy, and I always say that when I bring him up, but you can't deny that at the time he was one of the best wrestlers in the world. And much like I said with the Bash at the Beach thing, it's a shame that great matches like this with Booker T are overshadowed by something he had no control over. I absolutely love this match, and if you could stomach watching Chris Benoit matches now, and I know a lot of people can't, a lot of people just can't pull themselves to watch him because of what he did, and I understand that point of view too. It's something I wrestle with myself. He's a guy that was at one point one of my favorite wrestlers, and then he turns out to be a terrible human being. So I struggle. Sometimes I can watch his matches and I have no problem. Other times I see a monster. This is just a really great match. Like I said, it's one of the ones that really put both guys on the map. It's unfortunately my favorite match of Booker T's career, and it's sad that he gets overshadowed by what Benoit did, but let's choose to celebrate Booker T and what Booker T did, and even better, let's choose to celebrate woman for the great manager valet that she was, and screw Chris Benoit. Even though he's on this list, it's Booker T's accolade. Booker T had a great match here. So good that I'm willing to put it at number one, even though I hate talking about the other person, if that makes any sense to you. With all that being said, if you made it here to the end, first off, thank you for watching the whole video. I do appreciate that. Second, leave me your favorite Booker T match in the comments. Let me know you watched all the way to the end. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.